were the ones that I used to prefer to use when working with mineral patches for my own maps in the past. But yeah, something to look forward to the future. As it stands, oh, I'm so happy. But yeah, we'll start the review for collision codes. At the very first thing of everything is that the map doesn't really have a frontal OB pod besides this one. So instantly I will recommend to add like line of sight blockers, invisible ones, or do that. I'm sorry, or plant likes ones atop it, in order to make sure that Circ players can just park the small OB in here. It shouldn't be like too much of a problem. Just like oops, whoops, loss. Ah, yeah. Also, they changed the name so you can't recognize them. Okay, something like that, and then you select them, all of them. Oops, and you just lower them all. Something like that might actually work. Might be enough. Something like this, and then you need to like test it a little bit with an overlord to make sure that the OB can just gets like close and doesn't become like revealed by units on top of this high ground. Ooh, is that a graphical problem? Oh no. Yeah, kind of. The texture like bends over the cliff line. But yeah, no, some small little thing. When it comes to this, that is, I think it's like a high priority fix. What else? In the same area, the line of sight blockers. Also, ICL could simply like recolor the line of sight blockers like a slightly different darker tone in order so they fit like these ones that he used, like that Shakul foliage. As I was mentioning in other previous maps, the edges of the map, the canvas itself needs to be expanded considerably in order to make sure that wherever casters in WCS like zoom out with the camera, with the new camera features that have been there from like since the head of the swarm, whenever that happens, then all of that area doesn't become like dark, like it just looks ugly. A small little problem with decals, like them not being aligned. I know that ICL, if I recall correctly, was like very busy like these days, so I'm not sure if he will be able to actually do all of the changes. Also, this needs like one of those cliff gap filler doodats. When it comes to actual layout changes, this map is based on Oxide by, oh my god, I really forgot the name. ICL told me the name and he was like very happy that the map made it into the finalists. I think it was Freckling. I think, I don't want to say it because it might have been like Crystal Drag or other Brood War mappers. But yeah, this is by Oxide, by a Brood War map that it was like very much enjoyed by everybody. Like as far as I know, like Soap Human likes it as well. Negative Zero also enjoys. It's like a very cool map. For people that don't like it, I will seriously recommend, that don't know it, I will seriously recommend to just go browse into broodwarmaps.net. That is the site where all of that is the Brood War map cave, where all of the guys like go publish their own maps. When it comes to like the corner bases, it is the same thing that I told the music for bandwidth. Maybe the ramps might be like slightly too wide. Maybe here ICL could add like ESIL could add like a 4x4 set of rocks in this upper area in order to allow for an easier time wall enough and avoiding like too strong of harassment towards the corner bases. But it still is like many of these like high ground forts that are like kind of pocket-ish, I find them like to be work very well with current Legacy of the Void. When it comes to the Selnaga towers, they are like considerably strong, but not overly so, at least from my perspective. In the past, this map used to have like no flight zones, and this entire total wall used to be like considerably higher in order to like fully block any air units. But that obviously got changed, as no fly zones generally just don't work in StarCraft 2, if at all, especially in areas such as this one that is in the very center of the map. When it comes to the rest of it, uh, the map has like an issue with possible siege tank positions. Yesterday I was reviewing Acropolis, that from the macro category, that also has a setup in the ramps very similar to this, basically the same. But in this situation, the siege tank's position in this area can very easily siege the natural base. That was like it used to be worse, but that fix that was done like considerably improved the map in this situation. In past Team Blue map contests, we also have like issues with marine tank pushes in PvT, and some map like needed to be, sadly, like didn't make it, even though they were like very serious maps, very good ones. In these situations, because of a small change in the meta, that isn't like as much of a concern nowadays. Especially nowadays is basically the opposite, where the immortal pushes, because of the buffs to the robotics, alongside like stuff like observers, can be like problematic in PvT. So that's how it goes, I guess. Metagame memes. In the rest of the map, the values, I actually had to just check this, and I needed to recheck them again. In the same category, there was a map that was called Thunderbird that we will get to review soon. In our next video, you guys can just like jump into the next one. And that map by RQM, I think, will basically point the way forward in how to use mineral walls. It is a very good example of how to use them, and a smart fix in order to avoid problems with Terrans throwing mules on top of them, mining one single patch, and then just like pushing with marines, medivacs, or tanks. That is generally has been a very high problem, with a very high concern in general with our usage of single mineral patches. And RQM, just at least from my perspective, found something that might be like a permanent fix that everybody can just implement, something akin to that. In this situation, I don't consider it to be like too much of a problem. If anything, because this in a specific area, they are not so much of these ramps are not so much of a high priority area. It is certainly a risk in the sense that in the late game, Terran can very easily push with siege tanks in this area with marines, and then trying to attack this base, or attack the mirror position. So attacking this base, imagine like a Zerg or a Protoss took this base, and then Terran attacks from here, mines like a single or two patches, and then just like siege on top behind the minerals, and like pushing slowly forward. This area, it is like very smartly placed in the sense that it's very open, because it allows for like attacks, and for the defender to like rather comparatively easily flank like any attack going downwards from this setup in the central high grounds. I wouldn't recommend to make this like, if this became a problem wherever we have like other maps, it is not common to see maps that have like very high central high grounds, such as this one, because it lends itself to problems with like attacks going downwards, and like just having the high ground advantage to take down like enemy bases, and then just retreat back into the high ground, and just take an engagement or snipe like a key income infrastructure without many risks. So in this situation, with the open area, it is a very well executed situation. So in those other maps, I would personally recommend to avoid doing that, and make this area, this high ground area, just make it Lowground. Just make it like this, very Lowground, and you have two ramps leading something like this. Shrek had like a couple maps that were using like some very front to front ramps. And in the past, it's something that all of the map makers probably might have seen in other finalists or just from other map makers, because it's something that works very well. So for this situation and for other map makers that might be interested in doing something like this, here Collision Course shows like a possible way to implement this with like open areas around it, and alongside like a mineral wall on top of it, a mineral wall on top of it. The Selnaga, of course, also helps. One thing that I was like slightly concerned is the fact that of these mineral patches, that they weren't getting used like all that much throughout the tournament. Um, maybe I'm not entirely sure if that would be like strictly necessary, something to do. Uh, maybe as well, something like this. Or no, that makes it all too open, right? So yeah, something like this. Just make it like give it more contrast. The problem is that then siege tanks can't pass through it, and people just whine. It will be like, yeah, it is a very tough decision. Like I think that ICL did like the best that he could for his current layout. Also, other map by RQM, the same map that I was mentioning before, Thunderbird, used like a similar situation in here, but he did like a full wall off, and he made the wings of the map, the central high grounds, open. So instead of this area being closed, it was open, and the very center area was the closed one. So that's certainly like a nice stylistic choice, like many other things that I have been talking about in the TeamLiquid map contest. When it comes to the map itself, the third is like very comparatively very easy to take. Has an optional third that is like perfect with a very close fourth. Like gameplay wise, from the games that we saw, Collision Course had like some very standardish games on it. I think that one possible problem might be this ramp, that even though I very much like it, it could benefit from having a 4x4 set of rocks. Now those ones are ugly. Something like this, just in order to like further accent this ramp, nothing else. In order to avoid, for example, overly aggressive attacks through it. That's something that became a problem. There were a couple games where the map ended up in a base race, basically. Not a base race, but an army like attacked, and the opponent got caught in the other side of the map without an alternative way to quickly go and defend his base. I think that something like this might actually help prevent at least certain situations such as that in the future. Aesthetically, obviously, is like very pretty. I think that the water should have like a stronger specular light. Ephemeron had a very pretty light with the very nice specular reflections in the water. Maybe something that might be worth looking into it. Obviously, ICL has just become a beast in choosing like visually pretty details, such as for example the boxes with a very saturated grass. Some people were saying that the map might be actually too saturated. I'm not sure. I am this. I always prefer like highly saturated maps than not, but that's me probably. I wouldn't personally recommend it though, because even though you will always receive feedback of certain like loud people that um, aesthetically the map might be too bright, but uh, uh, it's it is almost a coin toss always, because you always end up having like people that very much enjoy bright maps, And then we have like the cycles in the map pool where you can have some seasons where the map pool isn't like very bright, and then you can see like a bunch of people in Reddit whining about that fact, even though it is not directly our fault, right? But anyhow, something to keep in mind. I like it as it is. The area, the canvas, really needs to be expanded upon. Non-standard mineral lines, like this mineral line, it is the mineral line that Bliss has been using. It is unknown what they will do with the mineral lines because they had been like iterating something upon it. I had some very small discussions with dev team about it with Monk. So yeah, it is unknown. Maybe they will start using like an actual standard mineral lines. Maybe they won't. It is unknown. So in this situation, I obviously will prefer for map makers to use like actually standard mineral lines. For those that are kind of new to map making, standard mineral lines are something like this. But obviously with the 900 mineral patches, something like this. Okay. Those also always the 900 mineral patches that are these ones always need to be in the far side, and the closer ones, the 1500, need to be almost very close to the town hall in order to make sure that this patch is always closer to the base pin geyser by 2 units, something like this, like not like that, like this. Okay. There is a for those that are getting like newer into map making, there is a thread called proper mineral placement in TeamLiquid. You guys can like check it out, or just send me a tweet, and I will send you the link of the thread about how to properly position the mineral lines and get you an image template. Anyhow, when it comes to the rest of the map, there are no problems with cannon rushes. So that's always obviously a bonus. This time around there were like a huge amount of maps that had like some very serious siege problems. I think that maybe in order to alleviate the problem with the siege tanks, ICL might have like a small amount of space, not that much, something like this, um, to play around with. Maybe even, let me check. It's always something that you need to iterate upon a little bit. As you can see, there can be like a small pylon in here, and that could block stuff. So something like this. That seems that might work. I can't see like overly strong cannon rush positions besides a pylon here, and a cannon rush in the middle. But that's still like almost acceptable. Habitation Station had a similar cannon rush, if I recall correctly. So yeah, something like that, a small little fix. Oops. Okay, there we go. Removing the doodads. Small suggestion in order to oops. A small suggestion in order to like try to alleviate a little bit the problem with the siege tank position. When I was been mentioning other maps, there is one thing that especially in the standard maps, I have been mentioning a lot that it's always generally ideal to place 2 Vespene geysers at one side, and in order to have like a total of 3 Vespene geysers that are like rather easily visible. That's not a law. You guys can actually just get away with doing something like this, but it is ideal for SEC players, and in this case even as well for Terrans with the scans, for them to have like 2 easily like visible Vespene geysers. I wouldn't recommend it in this case, mostly because when you position a Vespene geyser on top of this area, it bites a little bit into the effective amount of area that the main base has. So if something like this were to be done, then the entire mineral line might need to be pushed a little bit to the bottom, something like this. But that's anyhow, that's some rather serious nitpick. I think that this is fine. This is acceptable, just like in the other case as well, with the 3 Bespin exposed Bespin geysers. When it comes to the rest of this, I think that's basically it. Maybe a recommendation might be to add like invisible line of sight blockers in this area in order to make sure to like visible to as game designers generally say, like to telegraph the area that this area is where it's being communicated that it seems high ground, therefore it should behave as high ground. So in that situation, it might be beneficial to add like invisible line of sight blockers alongside this very unpathable edge to make sure that Zerg players maybe can just spark overlords without them getting sniped all throughout in both wings of the ramps. Anyhow, just finishing with the dogs in the background. I think that is basically it for collision codes by ICL. Some things to keep in mind. I think no, that's mostly basically it. This has been Collision Course by ICL for the TeamLiquid Map Contest 12. A very solid map for the Challenge 1 category with the middle patches. Take care guys and see you in the next one.